Welcome to Hired Up, the podcast for next-level executives and board nominees. The fun and informative podcast with host Maureen Farmer, CEO and founder of Westgate Executive Branding and Career Consulting. Westgate is a 100% independent premier executive branding and career services firm for high-profile leaders who are serious about navigating the hidden job market to get hired up. And we especially love helping successful executives make exciting career moves that let them be leading heroes at home, not just at the office. So if any of these challenges are ahead for you, visit us at westgatecareercoaching.com.
Welcome, Robin. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Maureen, it is such an honor to be with you. And, we've gotten to know each other over the last bunch of months anyway, through listening to other podcasts together. So I really appreciate you being on yours.
Oh, the honor is all mine. And I feel like I know you because I've heard you on so many other podcasts. So I guess for those listening and who are not familiar with Robin Dreeke, I would love to do a little introduction, and then you can kind of fill in where I leave off, just so that I'm not missing anything. And so I'm excited to have Robin here. Robin is an author of a number of different books and resources. How I got to know Robin was through a book that he's written called Sizing People Up, a veteran FBI agent's user manual for behavior prediction. And he's the former head of the FBI's counterintelligence behavior analysis program. And Robin, I'm just going to read the back of your book to give people a bit of context. So Robin Dreeke entered federal law enforcement in 1997 after graduating from the United States Naval Academy and serving in the United States Marine Corps. He received additional advanced training and operational experience in social psychology and the practical application of the science of relationship management. Dreeke eventually rose to direct counterintelligence behavioral analysis program of the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and recently retired as an agent of the FBI. He is author of It's Not All About Me and the Code of Trust. This is his third book. So welcome again, Robin.
Thanks, Maureen. I got to start using that bio. That's a good one.
It's in your book.
I know. I forgot that. The one on my website's a little different. I think that one's a little bit more concise. That's good. Thank you. We often don't read the back covers of our own books. So
exactly. Thank you again for joining me here today. And I think that we've had a couple of conversations, and some of the work that I'm doing with executives and CEOs and business owners is around helping them prepare for evaluative conversations, things like job interviews, conversations, even with media, sometimes with investors. And so one of the fascinating pieces of your book, or aspects of your book, is around garnering and establishing trust and rapport with other people, whether it is a recruiter or a hiring authority. It could be a chairman or a chairperson of the board of directors. A lot of our clients are preparing for those types of conversations. And in my experience, Robin, many of these individuals that we're working with have never had to, or have never been interviewed in a very long time. And they really worry about how to do that, how to build trust and rapport with the other person in a very short period of time. So I'd love to start there and see if you have any insights for us.
Yeah, absolutely. My foundation of everything I do is understanding the core of why human beings interact the way we do. So it all starts with, genetically and biologically, we're looking to be valued and be accepted by others. And even during the course of an interview, if you're the one being interviewed, you have to demonstrate that, your value and that you want to be accepted by the individuals that you're talking to. And so first thing I do is I make sure that everything I'm doing and saying includes at least one of these four things, because every one of these four things is demonstrating to the other person that I'm valuing you and I want to affiliate with you, and is seeking the thoughts and opinions instead of giving your own,
Mhm.
Speaking in terms of their priorities instead of your own. So let's talk about the CEO being interviewed for a job position. If you want to talk about your strengths, fantastic, but talk about your strengths in terms of the priorities of the organization that you're going into. Instead of giving them what you think about things, ask them what they think about current challenges that their company's dealing with, and then offer your thoughts and opinions in terms of those things. The third thing is you want to validate them without judging them. So validation is just seeking to understand them at that deeper level. And finally, empowering with choices, because when you give people choices, it's demonstrating it's all about them. So that's the framework I use for communication. And then it kind of when you're talking about what you do, and I was learning about it, it's all about how do you demonstrate to someone else that you're trustworthy. Sizing people up is about looking at people for predictable behavior and for signs of trust in them, but at the same time, these are the 6 things you can do to demonstrate that you're trustworthy to others. Things like vesting, demonstrating that you see their success tied with your own success, thereby it's overlapping. Demonstrating that you see this relationship is long term, that you're not looking for hey, I'm looking to make a mark here, and be out in 6 to 12 months. So longevity is important. Then reliability is huge, especially I think when you're doing an interview, because reliability is basically the combination of, are you actually competent in what you say you are in that resume, and do you have diligence and wherewithal to follow through on it? So that's important. Actions are also huge. It's the next sign, because actions are, especially when it comes to positive actions and what I call past patterns of key behaviors. If someone sees you doing something once, twice, or 3 times, the likelihood of continuing to do that the same way again and again is pretty high. Language we already talked about. Are you talking in terms of their priorities, validating them, giving them choices, and talking in terms of their priorities? And finally, demonstrating the 6th sign, which is emotional stability. That you can cognitively think through situations and stressful times without overly emotionally reacting to them and getting emotionally hijacked. So doing all those things during the course of a dialogue with someone, I think, is a great way to move forward.
Yeah, and I think there's an aspect of the job interview, or any interview really, that a lot of the individuals I work with don't think about. And I don't know if this is something that you've addressed in any of your books, is around the physio, getting back to kind of the emotional hijacking, sort of having the opposite of that. So getting the CEO to do some physiological and physical preparation for the interview. So approaching the interview and that conversation in a way that you would approach maybe a soccer game, where you're going to prepare for that. You're going to physically prepare for that, because I think that those positive neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, and those types of neurotransmitters really add to the rapport building piece, versus the cortisol that a lot of people feel before they're going into a job interview or that type of thing.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Matter of fact, to me, it relates really closely to when I'm coaching people for public speaking. Because I've done, and I know you've done too, I've spoken in front of thousands of people, 10 people, 1 person, and to me, it's all the same.
Mhm.
And I don't get nervous about these things anymore, because we have the ability to frame our own context of what we're about to do. The greatest thing that we have power as a human beings is we can frame how we see the world around us. And a job interview is exactly the same thing. Because why do people generally fear interviews? Because you fear you're about to be judged. That's why we
Mhm.
fear public speaking. It's why we fear the unknown, because again, our ancient tribal brain wants to be valued and affiliate with people, and we fear being judged because we'll be ostracized from the tribe, and it means we will not be passing on our genetic coding if we're not part of the tribe. And
Mhm.
so the best framing I give myself all the time, and I tell people to do, to prep themselves so you get those good neurotransmitters going in your brain, is think to yourself, I'm not about to try to convince someone that I'm good. I'm not about to be judged by someone. All I'm about to do is have a great conversation with a friend, and he wants to hear my ideas, or she wants to hear my thoughts and opinions. That's it. They're looking for me to succeed rather than looking for me to fail. So, give your own self that confirmation bias that they're looking for me to succeed. I'm going to talk to a friend about a great, thoughts and ideas I have, and they can't wait to hear what I have to say. That's how I frame everything I'm doing.
And that, generates, sort of garners the trust and the sort of accelerating the relationship. And I think that
It does, and I'm sorry to interrupt, because what it's doing is it's giving you congruence between the great verbal things you're saying and your nonverbals of your body. And because the creepy people that give off that creepy feeling are ones that might be saying the right thing, but non-verbally they're really reticent. They're very strained. They're stressed. And so that's what kind of sets people off. Rapport is really built quickly when you have lots of good, open, accommodating, comfortable nonverbals that you get when you have these thoughts and you're putting those words together. So I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. So the way I look at it from a corporate perspective, I say to my clients is to think about this, that organizations exist to make money, save money, or solve a particular problem. And so the job of the CEO, job candidate, is to understand where he or she fits in that value chain. So what is it that I can do to make you money, save you money, or solve a problem for you? And I think when a lot of candidates go into job interviews, board of director interviews, they really make it all about themselves, don't they?
Hmm.
Rather than thinking of themselves as a solution that they're going to present to the employer, for example.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because one of the things that is one of the mantras of, people formula, what I do is discovering the priorities of others and becoming a resource for their success in terms of those priorities. And that's what leaders do, so, and you just articulate perfectly, what companies are looking for is they're looking to solve problems and challenges and the bottom line. And so when you're being interviewed for a position, you have to know what those priorities and challenges are of that company, and talk in terms of your strengths and your skills of how you're going to be a resource for them in terms of those priorities. I mean, I remember my last job interview inside the FBI,
Mhm.
and it was actually after I was running the behavioral analysis program, as the chief of it, and all kinds of politics and cutting of funding and everything. Anyway, I had an opportunity to land a job 5 miles from my house, in my last couple of years, and come home for lunch every day. I mean, it was phenomenal opportunity to close out my career, and it was highly competitive because of this area, because of the job. And I remember, I looked at the job application. I looked at I talked to people that actually worked for this person that was doing the hiring. I looked at the objectives and priorities of the Richmond field office in Virginia here, and I knew my strengths, I knew my background, and so when I was doing the interview, I talked in terms of my strengths and skills, in terms of everything that was a challenge that they had, in terms of every priority they had. I made sure I had a solution because of my background, because of the skill set. And yeah, it was an easy decision for them to make, because everyone else is trying to sell themselves in that 30-second elevator pitch, which is great. The
Mhm.
elevator pitches are great only if you're talking in terms of how you're going to solve the problem with the person you're talking to.
And you have to know your audience.
Always, always, always.
So you might have, 5 or 10 or 20 different elevator pitches depending on who you're speaking with. That's how I look at
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. It seems like it's called, for me, it's also situational leadership. You got to know who you're talking to, and you got to adjust yourself
Right.
for them in the way that they want to hear you.
Right. So, given that a lot of people listening to this conversation today will be at some point preparing for a board of director opportunity or a new CEO opportunity for the very first time, they've not done this before. What would you say is the number one, I don't know, piece of advice you would give them, I guess?
I think probably the best piece of advice I've ever been given is be yourself. They'll see through anything else.
Right.
That you always be grounded in who you are, know your subject matter, which, at that point in your career you do, and be able to talk in terms of your subject matter. When they ask you, the other thing I value when I've interviewed people to come onto my team, and when I interview anyone, is my greatest value, and actually studies have shown this too. The greatest and most accomplished CEOs are the ones that are most self-aware.
Hmm.
And it's awareness inside of who you are, and as well as an awareness of what the world sees when they see you. And part of self-awareness for me is also knowing what your weaknesses and challenges are.
Hmm.
But the most self-aware people not only know the weaknesses and challenges, but they actually have a plan that they have in place to overcome them. I mean, my insecurities, are, I am way, genetically coded to be. I'm self-centered and egotistical. My 3 books are my manuals on how not to be the self-centered narcissist I was born to be. Because I know what my weaknesses are, and I created programs to overcome my challenges the best I can. And so one thing I'm looking for too, when I'm interviewing, is I'm looking for transparency.
Right.
If someone's asking you, a question, you don't have to keep giving them the rose-colored version of yourself, because that is it's so inaccurate, and it's also not never right. I mean, it's just, and so I'm looking for someone. If I'm asking you, tell me about some of your weaknesses, tell me about some of your challenges. I want transparency, because if you're
Mhm.
transparent with me during this interview, it means you're going to be transparent if I hire you. And when I have transparency, that is the number one thing that garners trust, because it gives me the ability to actually have situational awareness.
Mhm.
And if I have situational awareness, because you're giving it to me,
Mhm.
now we can make great cognitive decisions to actually solve the challenges and solve the priorities of the company. So those are the things I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people forget that they're being evaluated during the evaluation process. And so, one of the things that my clients are resistant to do is to follow up after a conversation. Very, very reluctant to do so. Here's an example. I was working with someone who managed to get two interviews with two chairs of the board of two different organizations for a job opportunity, for a very good job opportunity. And it was using the hidden job market. It was direct. There was nothing posted, and he received two meetings with these two different people, and they had two conversations with he had two conversations with each of these two people, and then the phone went quiet, and they got spooked. And despite my recommendation that he follow up with these two different people, he refused to do so. And so my concern when that happens is that those chair people, the chairman of the board, they happen to be men, chairman of the boards of these two different organizations, will take note of that,
Yeah, you got to follow up. You have to, I mean,
right?
understanding the context of, especially, you establish these baseline normal behavior during these, during these interviews, and the tempo of people talking, the tempo of information being
Hmm.
shared, and if all of a sudden you get a spike from that norm of what you've established as a baseline, something happened. And if you don't discover what that something is, especially because 99% of the time you're the one that caused it, you're doomed to do it again and again and again. It's very important to understand what caused the deviation from that baseline of normal, from how things are positively going, and all of a sudden they go sideways. Because if you don't understand it, you're and afraid of it. That's the other thing too. If you're afraid of it, you're going to constantly fear it, and it's going to be a thorn in your side until you fix it, until you figure it out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of CEOs are accustomed to being in control too, Robin.
Hmm.
And so if they've been in an organization for 25 years and then all of a sudden they are not the ones in control of a conversation or a decision, they tend to fall into that kind of that the limbic brain, sort of the flight, fight, freeze, or appease,
Right.
I think it's
Right.
called.
Yep. Absolutely.
And then they won't take the action required to go forward. And I say, if you do nothing, that's going to say volumes. You need it, even if you're not interested in joining this organization or pursuing this opportunity, you need to tell them so.
Oh, absolutely. Again, it goes down to transparency, because that kind of transparency becomes part of your brand, and people talk.
Mhm.
Reputations go before you
Mhm.
everywhere you go in life. I mean, I experienced that. And can you imagine, what kind of things the FBI has been through in the way of brand killing in the last, 4 or 5 years? It doesn't matter what side of politics you're on. The FBI brand took a massive hit, but did it impact me?
Mhm.
No,
Mhm.
because I have my own personal brand inside an organization, and that brand preceded me before every interview I did, before every recruitment attempt I did, before part of my job working counterintelligence. I did a lot of cold calls on lots and lots of corporations that were being targeted by, malicious actors. And so how do you inspire yourself in the door on a cold call for a company that doesn't want to talk to the FBI? That comes down to the ability to get over your title and position, because no one
Mhm.
cares about it, and make it about them, about how I'm going to be a resource, protect their bottom line. And again, it's so funny when you mentioned, that the they're used to being in charge. That really struck me, because that's part of getting over your ego and
Mhm.
vanity, and relying on that title and position you've had forever, because really it's not about how you make people feel about you, it's how you make them feel about themselves, about their company. And again, people are looking for you to be that resource for them and their success, and it's not about your title and position.
So interesting. I follow a gentleman by the name of Gary Ridge. He's the CEO of the WD-40 company. And he's a situational leader, a servant leader, situational leader. He has a fantastic employee engagement rate. Since he took over at the company, at the WD-40 companies in 1997, I think, they've had an upward trajectory of performance in every imaginable metric, including employee engagement. And, to your point about, leaders being, uh, you know, in support and serving their employees and serving in terms of how they can serve as a resource, as you talk about, to their
Mhm.
employees. And it's played out very, very well for that particular company. And so one of the challenges that our clients often have is that they will often get a job offer, and they are unsure of how to evaluate the job offer. It goes both ways, Robin, because you can have an organization who puts the CEO through a whole battery of tests and things like that, and then the candidate is left not knowing, how do I test the culture of this
Mm.
organization? So I encourage them to take their time. The resume becomes the roadmap for the interview. The interview becomes a roadmap for the job offer becomes the roadmap for the negotiation. And once that happens, that's when they are, in my opinion, able to ask some of the deeper questions around the culture of the organization. And when they don't do that, they risk joining an organization that does not align with their values.
Yeah, I think that's the most important question. It's the same reason why, on the flip side, people want to work for someone or work for organizations, because the individuals that are leading those organizations know how to demonstrate value to their people. My three pillars of the support, that are the three support legs of great leaders, is: one, leaders accomplish priorities and missions, because that's what they're supposed to do. The second is they create a healthy and safe environment, both emotionally and physically. And that's what they're testing when they're seeing if they want to work for a company, I think, and that's the culture. Is it a safe, and productive culture, emotionally and physically? And finally, leaders in organizations, they are resources for the success and prosperity of their people without expectation or reciprocity. They do it
Mhm.
because, when you do that for others, you create such morale that it doesn't matter what widget you're selling. It
Mhm.
becomes a place where people want to work. And now you have to pick up the cream of the crop.
Mhm.
I've done this, you mentioned WD-40, and I'm sitting here amazed, just listening. I'm like, man, that'd be a company I would want to work for, because, they do this. And I've
Mhm.
done this, if you write books on building trust and building relationships, generally the clients that come to me have organizations that are doing this already. They just want to even do it even better. And there's an automotive group out of New York that I worked with a number of years ago. And I never in a million years would have ever thought I'd ever want to work in an automotive, industry,
Mhm.
and sell cars. And yet, after working with this group and this company, I would work there in a heartbeat. It would be what would be my driving force in high school and trade school, was to work for this company, because they knew how to value and invest in people. And that's what I'm looking for too.
So what does that tell us then? I guess that what it tells me, I'll just say what it tells me, is that it's the people.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
People hire people. Companies don't hire people. And it's the relationship. And it always astounds me at how some organizations treat their employees. Like they treat them like widgets.
It's crazy, because when companies and organizations and leaders focus on metrics and metrics alone,
Hmm.
then that's where the problems start lying. I mean, I work with a lot of companies that are engineering companies or software companies that hire from within,
Hmm.
and so their leadership doesn't have the soft skills, the inspirational side of leadership. They want to, and so that's where they start struggling a lot, because they don't know how to value people. They're just valuing the bottom line, because if you value the people first,
Hmm.
the bottom line will follow. you know and
Absolutely.
and if you know your people, I have the thing I call the leadership notebook. The leadership notebook is all about understanding the goals, wants, dreams, and priorities of all your people, and figuring out how you're going to be a resource and offer them resources in terms of those things.
Hmm.
Because when you take care of that, and then, because when you do that, where's the focus on them, and now you establish a baseline of what you can expect that individual to do.
Right.
And so as a leader, they're going to meet it. And now what's really great is, if they someday, if something happens, they don't meet the metric they're normally meeting, instead of getting angry, demoting them, firing them, moving them, because you're just looking at the metric, something's gone sideways in their life. And then you can have a productive conversation about what can you do to ease that hurt, so that that goes away, so they can go back to the way they want to be. And you only do that when you pay attention to people and not the things.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I remember way back when I was working in corporate, I had to interrupt a board meeting because we had an injury at work. And, there's nothing that will keep a CEO or leader awake more at night than an injured employee.
Oh gosh,
And
yes.
we were working in a really high danger environment in this particular industry, and the CEO was so distraught that we had had a fairly major injury. And it was at that moment that I realized, wow, this company really does care about its
Hmm.
employees. And someone said, "Are you going to interrupt a board meeting?" And I said, "You're absolutely right, I am, because I know the CEO is going to want to know this." And it was really people first. It was actually safety first.
Absolutely.
But it was
And
all about people.
all those, and that's what, you know, these things travel like wildfire. And just knowing, I mean, all it takes is one negative instance where people blow off a person, and that travels faster than all the 10 positive instances you do. That's why you
Mhm.
constantly have to keep making sure you're doing those positive things, because that creates that brand. And when people know you're caring, what'll happen is when you have that baseline of an organization and a culture that is constantly taking care of people, in the rare occasion when all of a sudden someone does pay attention to a metric, or where something goes sideways, and someone might get a little emotionally hijacked and do something negative, that becomes the anomaly rather than the norm. And so
Mhm.
that's, and people are more easily look past those things and correct those things and move forward. But yeah, the healthiest companies out there are the ones that are so focused on the welfare of their people, creating that safe and healthy environment, because everything else. I mean, just look at Chick-fil-A.
Mhm.
Chick-fil-A is the greatest example. Who, when I was growing up, and even now, people do not aspire generally when you're young, your parents don't say, "Hey, I want you to grow up and work at a fast food restaurant."
Mhm.
But you know what? Everyone wants to work there, because
Yeah.
boy, do they know how to take care of their employees, and they're
Right.
always smiling, they're always energetic. And when COVID hit, they had these protocols put into place to take care of their customers and take care of their employees
Mhm.
so well. I mean, the
Mhm.
lines in our Chick-fil-A in our town were miles long when everything else was shut down, because they knew how to take care of people, they knew how to take care of their employees, and people just want to work there.
Right.
I mean, that, who wouldn't want to do that or be part of that?
Absolutely. So if you were someone who you were evaluating a company that you may want to target, what types of things would you look at if you didn't know anyone inside the organization? What types of things would you?
First thing I'm probably going to do is, I'm going to look at the turnover rate.
Mhm.
I think turnover rate's a great indicator, but it can be misleading too. If turnover rate is because people are moving on and getting better jobs,
Yeah.
because they're being helped to be promoted, that's one thing. But at the same time, though, are they hiring from within? They hiring from without? What's the percentage of those things? I'm looking at. I'm probably definitely going to be looking at the type of retirement packages and healthcare packages internally, because are they skimping on them, or are they taking care of their people? And if they're able to do well on those things, it's because they actually are probably making a good bottom line. They're probably making a good bottom line because their people are staying on board and very productive. So, and then I'm looking at, all whatever kind of company reviews I'm going to get too, is because if, I think looking at reviews of companies and the kind of customer service that people are given are another
Mhm.
great indicator, because if people are providing great customer service, that means that there's internal happiness. So if I'm looking for predominance of those types of things.
Absolutely. And one of the things I recommend individuals do as they're targeting in a company, or even if they're going through a process, is to pick up the phone and call the investor relations department,
Oh, absolutely.
right? Or call the customer service department, or call the
Absolutely.
sales department and see how you're treated.
Absolutely. And the ability, how open are they to taking feedback? Do companies give, after a customer, like, are they sending customer surveys out? Are they responsive to the surveys? All those little, basically get granular at the granular level. I
Mhm.
don't need to hear from the CEOs and executives anymore. I need to hear the health of the company, which comes from the customer relations side, and the employees that actually have that, public interaction. Because if those people are happy, generally what's going on above them is better.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me, Robin, I'd love to know a little bit more about the CEOs and the companies that you help. Can you maybe give us a case study or a couple of examples of the work that you do?
Sure. It's kind of twofold, or maybe even threefold. So a lot of times, good, healthy companies are having me come in. Not necessarily. It's actually a couple different levels. I work with the executive team to work with communication, and this communication between each other and the teams that they're having, but also how to communicate more effectively with their employees. I remember I worked with a company out on the West Coast, which was an oil and gas company, and one of the challenges they had was that it's a union company, and so all the line workers are union, except they also promote from within. And so when you become an executive and a supervisor, you're no longer part of the union, yet all your buddies are in the union. And
Yeah.
so, strategizing communication and getting your union workers to do things was one of their great challenges, especially since they're supposedly buddies, and now no longer buddies. Now so that was one of the fun challenges. But again, they had me talk to and teach the code of trust to the line supervisors now, and then also to the union workers, and then to put together in groups. So in other words, get everyone on the same communication method, so everyone holds each other accountable for good communication, and so you have that internal health. Then you have companies like that automotive company. One of the things that they continually did was not just they brought me in to talk to the company as a whole, so we can have that great communication between each other, so that everyone knows how to demonstrate value to each other. And also because then they hired me to come in to deal with their customer relations people, because automotive companies, they generally deal with a lot of angry customers. And then they put their customer relations people through some of my intensive online courses to really hone their skills. And they were doing things great already, I thought, but they really wanted to up their skills. And also because it gave their people an opportunity to take more training so they can get promoted and advanced. So it becomes, I work with the CEOs for that, leadership point from the top, so they can actually filter down this great communication style. I work with the mid-level people for customer relations that are dealing with the higher client people, as I do a lot of finance companies that deal with customer relations. And then I have the line workers that I work with a lot too, that are dealing directly with, public and the widgets a lot of times. And so bringing all those three different levels together is a lot of times what I wind up doing.
It's fantastic.
It's fun. It's the greatest fun I have with it is, all the different challenges, because my framework for the code of trust and sizing people up, it's the same every time. It's just I just need to know what the challenge is, because a lot of times people say, well, how do I deal with this, and my first response is, I have no idea. Let's go to the code of trust. This is a process of understanding how to not convince someone of something, but how can I inspire them to want to, whatever the challenge is, whether it's to get someone to do something, whether it's to sell a widget, whether it's to motivate someone to do something better. Anything it is, I never think in terms of convincing them, because convincing is about me. I'm thinking in terms of inspiration, because inspiration has to come from within them. And so the only way you inspire someone to do something is understand what their priorities are, and then offer them resources to keep working in terms of those priorities. Now, the greatest thing is, if you just start discovering, and they discover that their priorities are no longer aligned with their job description, aligned with the company's priorities, well, then we can be a resource for them getting out the door. I mean, because that's just becomes then a bad toxic fit, which is no good for them, and it's no good for the company. But you only discover that, great leaders do, because you have to learn their priorities.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Also means there's no bad conversations. There's just conversations about them. Everyone thinks, how do I have a challenge? How do I have a difficult conversation? I always think there are no difficult conversations, because if you make the conversation about them, there's no difficulty. Which is, in other words, where do you see yourself in 5 years? If you could do anything right now, what would it be? And then, all right, so help me understand, is what you're doing helping or hindering that? Have you talked to someone in that position? If you don't want to work for me, fantastic. Where you want to work? Great. What's the first thing you're going to do if you want to work there? They're going to call me. What do you think I'm going to say? What do you need me to say? What do you want me to say? What kind of things can you show me so I can say those things about you? Again, that entire conversation is about that person. It's about them, and me just being a resource for them with clarity on how for them to get to where they're going.
I always think that honoring the relationship has to come first. Don't you think?
Number one.
I'm working with a group. It's a board of directors, and I'm the VP in the group. And we've had some conflict over the past 9 or 10 months. And so I'm no expert in conflict management whatsoever, But one of the things I have learned, especially, in this business over the past 9 years, is that if you honor the relationship first and then deal with the issues second, they'll sort of settle themselves almost to a certain degree.
This is the most important thing in the entire world I've ever learned in my life, because those conflicts that you're talking about, they're
Mhm.
what I call means goals. Because that cliche, it's the means to the end, and everyone always thinks you have to think of these means goals first. These milestones to get to the end. But what I learned is if you focus on the end first, the
Mhm.
means fall into place. And so I have these three anchors, which are my ends goals. And then number one is what you just said. It's why I'm like bubbling with this. The number one ends goal of every single situation I ask myself is, what I'm about to say or do going to help or hinder that healthy professional relationship? Because
Mhm.
that above all else will make everything fall into place. Number two is open, honest communication and transparency, because you cannot have a healthy relationship without that.
Mhm.
My
Mhm.
third is I'm an available resource for your success and prosperity without expectation or reciprocity.
Mhm.
Because when
Mhm.
I make myself available, in other words, I don't impose myself, I'm available if you want it, for your success and prosperity as you define it, without expectation or reciprocity. That's what great people do. That's what great relationships have. And when you honor those three things, everything else falls into place.
It's absolutely fascinating to watch this happen because during this board uh, evolution, I guess, of the board over a period of months, uh, I watched one of my colleagues do something very difficult. It was a very difficult conversation that she had in a board meeting, and later on, we got very good feedback from it. In fact, we got what we wanted, but in a very respectful way. And I said to her, I'm so proud of you for what you did, because she stepped up to the plate. She asked a very difficult question, but she did it in a way that really honored the other person's perspective. And I said to her after that, you nailed that. I said this to her privately, and I said, and above everything else, you've honored the relationship. And this was a very difficult relationship over a period of time. And now I would never say that they're the best friends, but their relationship is much, much better, just simply from that very simple approach to working with this other person.
Well, it's healthy professional relationship. It doesn't mean you
Mm,
like someone. It means that you can have a healthy dialogue and relationship. And you actually did. You said two things which are completely honoring those four things I said. She asked difficult questions. In other words, she sought thoughts and opinions, and she respected their opinions, which is validation.
mhm,
When you add those two things in there, shields are coming down, the other person's dopamine is flowing,
mhm,
and you're going to have a more healthy relationship. It does, again, liking someone has nothing to do with trusting someone,
mhm.
and it has nothing to do with healthy relationships. It can help, but it also can give you positive or negative confirmation bias. It's so much better if you can actually remain cognitive about how to actually have a good, healthy dialogue in that healthy relationship, especially in professional settings.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things, Robin, that a lot of business leaders sometimes don't realize is how important recognition is of not just their staff, but of their colleagues, of everyone that they work with. And it's so um, overlooked. And so I often say, to some of the CEOs that I'm working with and other people is, did you recognize them for that activity or for that result?
Yep. That is
And
that is
right?
validation. Yep. And and
Validation.
part
Yeah.
and part of that recognition too, people often overlook, especially busy CEOs and executives, the power of presence.
Mm.
It is huge. My son is actually my son is the one that reminded me of this past summer. He's a midshipman at the United States Naval Academy. He's a junior there, and they've been going through some living heck like everyone in the world has with COVID. And so he was recalled earlier to go through quarantine for 2 weeks before the incoming plebes came in. The freshman class.
Mhm.
A lot of stress, a lot of being locked down, a lot of no liberty, no anything, masks everywhere they go. Not a lot of fun. And it can be extremely immensely fatiguing and demoralizing. But what he learned was that it's not, leadership for him, he thought, part of being a great leader was doing all, being able to run really fast, lots of push-ups, lots of pull-ups, because that's what they're tested on all the time. But he noticed the massive effect he had on his squad of new freshmen there at the Naval Academy with just being present. just walking the deck when they're all in their lockdown in their rooms. He was the one that brought them their meals, not someone else.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one that actually took them out for what they called sunshine time. They were allowed to go out an hour a day. And a lot of the other people were making that hour a day difficult on these incoming people because they think they need to train them or make life even worse. My son took them outside and had them actually look at the sky and come up with what they thought the clouds represented. I mean, he actually brought them through exercises. I mean, it's hilarious, and he learned the power of presence. And then on the flip side, he was getting really angry about leadership above them because they weren't getting information. No one's passing word on things. And all of a sudden one day, the commandant of midshipmen, who was actually one of my classmates, comes, walks the deck, takes 30 seconds, interacts with the midshipmen running things, and the effect it had on the morale was immeasurable.
Mm-hmm.
Having leadership just come down for 30 seconds, let them know that they see what's going on, let them understand, hey, I saw what you did when you took them outside for that sunshine time. That was really inventive. That was really powerful. I think it's making a big difference. Like you said, that recognition.
Mm-hmm.
Presence and recognition have such an effect on corporate culture in such a positive way that I guarantee you, when you see those great healthy companies, they're doing those things.
Absolutely. Ones to watch. And Robin, I've been studying your profile and following you on podcasts and reading your books. Absolutely fascinating career in counterintelligence with the FBI, with the Marine Corps. I mean, I could
Mhm.
I could keep this interview going forever, but I'd love to know, I guess, one question I'd love to ask you is, over that period of time, what has surprised you most about your career?
How wrong I was doing it for so many years. um, there's probably two things I would have done differently and added earlier in my life that as part of my mission in life now is to help spread this word for younger people, and actually anyone who hasn't realized it yet. It doesn't matter whether you're young or old. And one, when I finally realized that my success was more tied to the relationships I had and how I was helping other people be successful, I would have made a big difference. I mean, instead of, I spent most of my life as this type A hard charging guy on the Myers-Briggs. I'm an ENTJ, extroverted, intuitive thinking judger, life's natural leader, the executive. No, it makes you a self-centered narcissist when you're young. And so the day I realized that it wasn't about how good I made myself look, and I started realizing I need to understand how to make others look good and how to let others succeed. When I started realizing that and actually practicing that, my entire trajectory changed around. And the second thing that I didn't realize, and a lot of us don't realize, if I had intentionally sought out mentors and guides, I would have avoided the humbling moments much greater. I mean, I look back and reflected on this. I'm putting a course together on mentoring, how to recognize one and how to be one, because we need both. We need both. We
Right.
need to be one and we need to recognize them. I look at all the things that went sideways in my life as because I did not have a mentor or guide in those points. I look at the times when I succeeded by mistake. It was because someone was gracious enough to insert themselves in my life as the mentor and guide. And it's in those moments. I mean, in my books, I write about my Jedi master I call Jesse Thorne, and his real name is John. John lives 5 miles from here. He retired down here in Virginia with me in the United States, and he inserted himself in my life, and I grabbed onto him. I was fortunate enough. I grabbed onto the mentors and guides when I recognized them. But if I had sought them out, I would have done so much. Like when I was, and when do we need them? Well, we need them all the time. But most importantly, I thought with hard work and diligence, I can solve any problem I'm facing. Not necessarily. In matter of fact, very rarely. If I recognized a problem or challenge in my life, the first thing I should have done is I should have sought people that actually had that experience before, that actually been there before, and the people that I want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and ask them their thoughts and opinions on how to move forward. That would have made the entire thing different.
I think that we're all on a learning journey, and I would be not much different from you in some of your observations. Absolutely. And I think that the individuals who have that mentorship and have people in their lives who have been able to help them along the way, I agree. people need to have mentors and they need to be mentors.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's the tribal way, isn't it? Really, is we learn from our elders. Our elders are tasked with teaching our children and are the people who are entrusted to our care. I think the number one thing for me when I look back over my career and I watch others is that how many of us have never worked on our career? We've worked in it, to your point about solving problems
Hmm.
and doing the things that are important to have done. But how many of us actually work on the career? So
Hmm.
seeking out mentors and seeking out opportunities to help others in a very deliberate way, you know?
Absolutely. Because when you're doing those things, what are you doing? When you're seeking a mentor, because when you seek a mentor, you're seeking their thoughts and opinions. You're going to talk in terms of their priorities. You're going to validate the things they're saying without judging them. I mean, so you're doing those, you're using that language. So you're practicing that. And when you're doing that, you're creating more healthy relationships.
Mhm.
I always say, you can have the greatest genetics and biology on the face of the planet, but without relationships, you might as well be a fool on top of a mountain by yourself.
Yes.
Because when you start forming these relationships as a mentor, as a mentee, these are good, healthy professional relationships, and they will bring you all the answers you ever need to any challenge you ever face. Every time I faced a new challenge of, inside the FBI, I was constantly challenged with, hey, we have no information about this critical vulnerability for our national security. Robin, go. And I'm like, I have no idea. I'd go to I'd go to my I call my magnificent seven. I had 7 confidential human sources, my great healthy relationships. And I'd say to these 7 people, I said, anyone have any idea? They say,
Mhm.
nope, Robin, I got no idea either.
Mhm.
But because of my healthy relationship with them, they now have healthy relationships with others. And now it was generally, I only had to go 2 degrees of separation to get the answers and information I needed to solve whatever problem or challenge I had. And all that came from is the humility and humbleness that I
Mhm.
don't have all the answers,
Mhm.
and the relationships that I had that brought it to me.
Mhm.
Because what did I do for them? I was always available to them in the same expectation. I was always there unconditionally to solve whatever challenge or problem they had, no questions asked. Drop everything for them when they needed it, because
Mhm.
that's what healthy relationships do.
Mhm.
Piece of cake.
No, this is absolutely fascinating. Here's one, and I picked up on. It's actually I was sitting on my dock when I wrote this down, page 36. Resumes rarely reveal what people will do when forms of temptation or
Mm,
duress arise. And then another one was plain talk is good because simplicity reveals and complexity conceals.
yeah,
Those both really resonated with me, particularly the second one, because I think that people feel as though they need to have this corporate speak or corporate, I don't know, lingo. And I think plain language really helps to, I don't know, anchor the relationship and to build trust. Don't you think?
absolutely. And it's not just the plain language. The true masters of their craft and information are the ones that can make it so simple that anyone can do it. I call these things the elusive obvious.
Hmm.
I mean, people can really think that building relationships is very complicated, and people can give all these. I used to teach a lot of interviewing, source
Hmm.
recruiting, all this, high end things that people think, oh my gosh, you have to have all these advanced skills. And no, all I
Hmm.
have to do is understand a very simple truth about human beings. We're always going to act in our own best interests. If
Hmm.
I just know what your best interests are in terms of safety, security, and prosperity, your priorities and challenges, and I offer you resources in terms of those things, we're going to have a relationship. Isn't that
Hmm.
simple? That's the simplest thing. And how do I make that conversation about you? It's
Hmm.
not complicated. I'm going to seek your thoughts and opinions, talk in
Hmm.
terms of your priorities, validate you, and give you choices. So people that can overcomplicate things don't understand it that thoroughly yet.
Hmm.
And also, if they're tending to, so people always ask me, so Robin, how do you avoid people that are manipulative, or being taken advantage of? And I'm seeking transparency in everything I'm looking for. So if you're overcomplicating something to me, which I can't understand because I have a wee small brain, and I ask you questions so I can discover what it is you're trying to accomplish. If you don't make it clear for me, then there's a lack of something going on in this area, in this lane, and I'll just back away and just not engage,
Hmm.
because either you don't know it well enough to be able to explain it to me,
Hmm. Hmm.
or you don't want to explain it to me at that level because of something you're hiding. There's some subterfuge, whatever it is.
Hmm.
You're not looking for a healthy relationship in this lane because you have an inability or unwillingness to be able to explain it simply. That's fine.
So yeah, that's a really sort of interesting area too. It comes down to, in my opinion anyway, intuition and the gut.
Mm,
And a lot of times, and I've proven this myself over the past 9 years, I ended up working with two different people who, in retrospect, I would never work with. And when I didn't trust my gut, because there was that lack of transparency within
hmm
that, you know, they wanted something and I wasn't quite sure. I thought I knew what they wanted, wasn't what they wanted. And my gut from the very, very beginning told me not to do this. And I think this happens a lot, of course it happens. It happens every day. But a lot of times I working with somebody close to me who accepted a position with a company, and he said, Maureen, I just don't have a great feeling about this. And, but he went ahead anyway, I think it as a means of sort of punching above his weight and kind of stretching himself. And at the end of the day, and it took 2.5 years to figure it out, Robin, it was a very bad choice for him. And he said, if I had have listened to my gut, if I had have, paid attention to that, I would not have ended up in this situation. And so I think, for anyone listening here today who's in a conversation like that, I recommend, if you don't really understand the nature of the conversation, you don't understand, for example, who you're going to be reporting to. This happens all the time, where people are join organizations and then 2 months later, the person to whom they are supposed to be reporting has now retired, or they've moved on to another organization. And your reporting relationship with your boss is very, very important, in my opinion and in my experience. And so I encourage people to ask lots of deep questions. And so tell me, Robin, who will be my boss? And, you know, um, are there any plans for succession, and those types of things? Because without asking those questions, you may end up in that type of a situation.
Absolutely. And when people, so there's lots of different kinds of gut feelings, but the gut feeling that you're talking about actually can be a very accurate one. Some people, sometimes we get ourselves in trouble and sometimes not so much. And this kind of gut feeling is a very good one, because what you're basically talking about is he didn't feel good because there's a lack of transparency and understanding. And when
Hmm.
you ask those clarifying questions, you should have very quick, clarifying answers. In other words, when we
Hmm.
start interacting with someone, we're naturally establishing a baseline of what normal dialogue is.
Hmm.
And then when you're seeking clarification in certain areas on those good questions you just mentioned, I should have the same tempo of conversation, dialogue, and answers that I was having when we were just talking about the weather.
Hmm. Hmm.
But what happens is, if there's obscuring, if there's avoiding, if there's lack of clarity, if they're overcomplicating, if their tempo changes,
Hmm.
that is saying we have something unhealthy going here, and that's what gives us that I don't have a good feeling about this. Pay attention to it. I think the first thing to do when you have that question in your head, whether you're making the right decision or not, because something feels a little off,
Hmm.
understand why you have that.
Hmm.
What gave you that feeling? Because I love exploring when we have an emotional reaction to something. It's
Hmm.
because we are literally witnessing something and
Yes.
experiencing something.
Hmm.
Figure out what that is, and once you figure that is, you're making good observations. The likelihood that you're accurate on that observation is very, very high. And so what's really great is once you can identify what's giving you that feeling, what exactly happened at what moment, what question you asked that gave you that feeling. Now you have a great opportunity to address it with that individual.
Hmm.
Say, listen, last time we got together, I left that meeting not feeling too good, and I really thought of why. And it was because when I asked this, I didn't really, and it's my fault. I really didn't understand the answer you gave me. Do you have the ability to kind of help me understand and walk me through this? And if they do, if they're apologetic, if they own it,
Hmm.
then you know what, we might be able to move forward. But if they've placed the blame on you, or they avoid it, or they don't answer the question, or to continue to overcomplicate it, that's your sign right there.
Hmm.
Move on.
Absolutely. Well, look, Robin, I want to be in complete service to you here today, and give you a chance to talk a little bit about your programs, and about, we talked a little bit about the types of work you do with CEOs and corporations. Um, how can people get in touch with you, and what other types of things do you do besides helping CEOs build great teams?
Well, thank you very much. uh, Easiest thing in the world to do is go to my website called peopleformula.com. All one word, People Formula. That's my company. On there, I have multiple tiers of ways I can be a resource, from whether it's my blog postings where I talk about a lot of these topics we talk about. I put out thoughts of the day through all my social media. That also is I added a page to my site there, which is on there, all 100% leadership based thoughts that I put out based on my books. I have 3 of them out. You can also order any of the books on there or Amazon. But I also do obviously live webinars, for groups and organizations. I have online, mentoring and coaching that I do for one-on-one, as well as I have an online training academy. I have, each one of my books, whether it's rapport, building trust, or assessing others for trustworthiness and predictable behavior. Each one of those has a course on there, whether it's a fast track course where you get it in an hour, or it's a more advanced one where I actually walk you through the tools, as well as a coaching mentoring session after that. So I really try to take care of it all, at all levels of what people want to invest, as well as links to podcasts like yours on there as well. If you really just want to listen in to hear me, as I call Death by Robin, just monologuing about all my thoughts and opinions through my experiences of understanding human behavior. So please check it out.
Nothing could be further from the truth. I've listened to most of them. I'm, in fact, registered for one of your programs because what I always want to do is serve as a resource for my clients and colleagues as well. So I'm going to learn a little bit more about profiling and predicting behavior. I'm looking forward to it. And so why don't you say your website again one last time before we sign off?
Sure. It's peopleformula.com. People Formula, one word.
Awesome. That's amazing. Well, Robin, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really enjoyed it. And I hope to catch you on another podcast somewhere.
Thanks, Maureen. It was an honor and pleasure to share with you and your audience as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Hired Up with Maureen Farmer. If you enjoyed the show today, please tell a friend and write a review for us. Do you struggle to find words for emails, phone calls, and job applications for your C-level job search? Get our CEO Script Vault, job search scripts for busy executives to help you get hired up. Kindle edition available on Amazon.com. For customized resources to help you get hired up to your next C-level position, visit westgatecareercoaching.com. We'd love to welcome you into the Westgate family of success stories.